Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. Israel says it will allow foreign countries to airdrop aid into Gaza, as the health ministry says there are 9 people who've died from malnutrition in the last 24 hours. Hundreds across the world protest the humanitarian situation in Gaza and Israel's blockade of aid trucks. Plus, it's World Drowning Prevention Day. We'll take a closer look at this silent but deadly epidemic. And we're beginning with Israel saying it will allow foreign countries to airdrop aid into Gaza in the coming days, reminiscent of a similar action that took place last year. Aid groups had warned at the time that they could not deliver aid in sufficient quantities. It comes as the Gaza Health Ministry says 9 people have died in the last 24 hours from malnutrition in Gaza, bringing the total number of such deaths to 122. Reporters on the ground in Gaza say lack of access to food, clean water and health care, especially where there is conflict, can lead to malnutrition. Children under the age of 5, adolescents and even pregnant or breastfeeding women can fall victim. Even a common cold or a bout of diarrhea can kill a malnourished child. For young children and babies, malnutrition can lead to stunted growth, and in severe acute cases, as in Gaza, people's faces, stomachs and legs can swell despite their bodies being painfully thin, a condition known as kwashiorkor. Meanwhile, there is uncertainty over the future of peace talks between Israel and Hamas amid the ceasefire in Gaza. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff said on Thursday the response by the Palestinian armed group Hamas to the latest proposal approved by Israel showed a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire. Israel's government also says its team is leaving Doha for consultations, although a senior Israeli official was quoted by local media as saying that there was no collapse in the negotiations. Hamas expressed surprise about what he called Witkoff's negative remarks, and an official said that they'd been told Israeli negotiators would return next week. Hamas expressed surprise about what he called Witkoff's remarks and said that they will be negotiating those talks again next week. All eyes are now on the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who intends to announce the UK's recognition of the State of Palestine, coming after France's President Emmanuel Macron also made known his intention. Critically, France is not recognizing a Palestinian state now. It will do so, according to Macron, at the United Nations General Assembly in September. A former British diplomat, however, says the UK recognizing a Palestinian state would not necessarily improve the chances of a peace settlement in the Middle East. According to him, the problem is the day after you recognize, you will get jubilant scenes in Ramallah, on the West Bank and in Gaza. You'll get a hostile and negative reaction from the United States, and you will certainly get condemnation by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What has changed on the ground the day after you recognize Palestine, and how has that contributed to the moment non-existent peace process, he asked. Germany, on the other hand, has ruled out recognizing a Palestinian state, arguing that this should be the final stage of a negotiated 2-state solution because of historical guilt for the Holocaust. German politicians usually avoid criticizing Israel. Back at the United Nations, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, reported that UN teams are able to collect food aid, mainly flour, from Kerem Shalom and Zikim crossings on Wednesday, but noted that more than 1 million children are bearing the brunt of deepening starvation and malnutrition, with reports of death of malnutrition increasing by the day. Reporters in New York on Thursday were told by UN Deputy Spokesperson Farhan Haq that nearly 5,000 of the 56,000 children under the age of 5 who were screened for malnutrition in Gaza, in Deir al-Balah and in Khan Yunis were found to be acutely malnourished.
In Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that UN teams were able to collect food aid are affected. Turning to the situation in Gaza, The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that UN teams were able to collect food aid, mainly flour, from Kerem Shalom and Zikim crossings yesterday. But our partners note that more than 1 million children are bearing the brunt of deepening starvation and malnutrition, with reports of death from malnutrition increasing by the day. According to our partners working in nutrition, in the first 2 weeks of July, nearly 5,000 of the 56,000 children under the age of 5 who were screened for malnutrition in the Gaza, Deir el-Balah, and Khan Yunis governorates were found to be acutely malnourished. This is a staggering 9% rate, up from 6% in June and just 2.4% in February. The UN and our partners are unable to bring enough aid into Gaza due to a number of interdependent factors, including bureaucratic, logistical, administrative, and other operational obstacles imposed by Israeli authorities, ongoing hostilities and access constraints within Gaza, and incidents of criminal looting and more shooting incidents that have killed and injured people gathering to offload aid supplies along convoy routes. Taken together, these factors have put people and humanitarian staff at grave risk and forced aid agencies on many occasions to pause the collection of cargo from crossings controlled by the Israeli authorities. OCHA stresses that the little assistance that has been able to reach warehouses, distribution points, and other humanitarian facilities inside Gaza is woefully insufficient to curb starvation or sustain life-saving operations, particularly as the Israeli military continues to issue new displacement orders. So many families have been squeezed into just 12% of Gaza area, while the remaining 88% of the Strip now either falls within Israeli militarized zones or has been placed under displacement orders. Meanwhile, the entry of critical items such as tents or any other shelter materials has been banned by the Israeli authorities for over 20 weeks, and the trickle of fuel now let in is also wholly insufficient.
We're looking at dozens of doctors, veterans, and former U.S. officials rallying across Washington, D.C. to denounce the government's ties with Israel and condemn the operations in Gaza. Speaking outside the Capitol building, Josephine Gubelo, a U.S. veteran, slammed the aid's blockade in Gaza. She also expressed support for Palestinian-American Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, emphasizing that the support for Tlaib and the Palestinian people is not political.
Committing crimes against humanity and justifying. They need the media to stop dehumanizing us. They need no one to defend their killers. Shame on those who do. While human rights groups, UN officials, and genocide scholars have already warned that Israel's actions may amount to genocide. What people in Gaza and all of Palestine need is an end to occupation and justice and accountability for all who enabled this, governments and media alike. As if Jabalia and Rafah have been destroyed. It is shameful that I'm still saying this after 22 months of the genocide. It is shameful that the world has been watching this for 77.
They are not allowing baby formula to reach babies. The level of evil that it takes to make a decision to starve a baby as a means of war, as a weapon of war. What have we come to as a humanity? What have we come to as a country where we are
More protests coming up. Pro-Palestinian demonstrations holding across Rotterdam Central Station against the ongoing blockade in Gaza. Hundreds of protesters seen banging pots and pans while holding signs that condemn the humanitarian crisis in the enclave. According to a United Nations-backed assessment, 1 in 5 people in Gaza are now facing starvation due to the ongoing Israeli blockade, with 93% of the population experiencing extreme food shortage.
So I'm here with several other members of our collective, Erev Rav, an anti-Zionist Jewish collective here in the Netherlands. We are here to show that Zionism and Judaism are different. And Judaism, which is a religion, has nothing to do with Zionism, which is a Jewish supremacist system. Just like not all white people are white supremacists, not all Jewish people are Zionists. Today, people, children are starving in Gaza, and we have to work to free Palestine. The other reason we have to be here is we are all Palestinian. The same things that are being done to the Palestinians can be done to all of us. This sets a precedent, what's happening in Gaza, that it's okay for this to happen, that the world will stand by and watch. And next time, it could be you.
The starvation of people of Gaza is breaking every human rights law, and this is something that needs to be ended right now. The food and the water and the medical support is basically human right, and we as people of the Netherlands are refusing the starvation of the people of Gaza, are refusing the blockade which Israel is doing. We are raising our voices. We are saying it clear: no to starvation, no to the blockade on Gaza. This genocide has to end, and the people responsible to it should be held responsible here in the Netherlands, in The Hague, for their war crimes.
To finally push our government to act against the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. It's going on for 2 years almost, and now we've reached the next level with forced starvation. And we see people die every day from hunger. And European governments, the Dutch governments, they're doing nothing. So we're gathering here across the Netherlands to indeed finally ask our government to act. We need sanctions, we need intervention, we need our government to stop the genocide that is unfolding before our very eyes.
There were also protests at The Hague on Thursday, all in support of Gaza. The protesters beating pots and pans, holding Palestinian flags and signs in support of Gaza to raise attention to the hunger crisis in the enclave. The United Nations Children's Fund says more than 2.4 million people in Gaza, including 1.1 million children, are at risk of famine due to the closure of the crossings into the enclave and severe food shortages.
Well, the reason we're here today is because there is a national call for a sit-in against genocide and starvation in Gaza. Obviously, there are more than 2 million people in Gaza right now starving and facing famine, and Israel is refusing to let in aid. And at the same time, European states and the United States, and even some Arab states, such as Jordan and Egypt, are just looking at this situation unfolding. And we are here to call the Dutch government to action, so it will start putting the correct pressure on Israel and also on the other complicit states to start letting necessary aid and food into Gaza.
Israel is doing wrong. It's very doing wrong. It's killing people, children, women, and it's starvation, all because of greed, because they want to have more land and more land and more land. And all the Arab states, they are not doing anything. All the European states, they're silent. And we're here, we're the voice of Europe, and we hate it. We really don't want this to happen to Palestine. Palestine belongs to its people.
I think it's all about money and power. It's not about people. It's not about Jews or Muslims or Palestinians. It's just a gigantic state, an apartheid state. That's it is.
Israel's been starving Gaza for more than 3 months now. All these empty pots and pans symbolize the starvation of the Palestinians at this moment. More than 100 people already have starved because of the lack of food, because of Israel's blocking everything that's going into Gaza. And that's the reason, for me personally, it's a little bit out of desperation, honestly, because we have been demonstrating for a year and a half. And this is to so many. But the pots and pans symbolize the starvation that Israel is putting on the people of Gaza. So that's basically what we're doing here. And we're trying to get attention to our leaders, so to say. I don't like the word leaders because they don't have any quality that qualifies a leader. But the people in power of our country, we need to make them see and make them feel that the people are behind the people of Gaza.
The United States Deputy Spokesperson for the Department of State, Thomas Bigot, says he blames Hamas for the ongoing blockade in Gaza, as well as the delay of 6,000 aid trucks lying at the feet of Hamas. It comes after Israel closed all border crossings into Gaza, stopping the delivery of food, medicine, and humanitarian aid.
So first, a statement from Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Quote, "We have decided to bring our team home from Doha for consultations after the latest response from Hamas, which clearly shows a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. While the mediators have made a great effort, Hamas does not appear to be coordinated or acting in good faith. We will now consider alternative options to bring the hostages home and try to create a more stable environment for the people of Gaza. It is a shame that Hamas has acted in this selfish way. We are resolute in seeking an end to this conflict and a permanent peace in Gaza. Together, these agreements highlight the United States' sustained leadership in the region and our strong partnership with Indo-Pacific allies and partners. We are also gravely concerned by the escalating violence along the Thailand-Cambodia border and deeply saddened by reports of harm to civilians. The United States urges an immediate cessation of hostilities, protection of civilians, and a peaceful resolution of the conflict."
What are these alternatives?
Well, look, ultimately the statement speaks for itself, but the question has never been our commitment to a ceasefire. The question has been Hamas's commitment to a ceasefire, and that has been made clear by the Special Envoy's statement. The fact that we have entered in good faith in trying to reach an end to this conflict. And as the Special Envoy said, we remain dedicated to trying to see an end to this conflict.
Can you help us understand why at this moment, when you see the conditions on the ground in Gaza, with now mass starvation, the US is deciding this is the moment to walk away from these talks?
This is not a question of what the United States is doing, it's a question of what Hamas has done. This is a response to what Hamas has done continually.
But that's not the position of many of the Israeli hostage families.
Israel has long accepted the deal on the table, and Hamas has long rejected it. I mean, this is about, it's never about been our commitment to a ceasefire. That's never been the question here. We have engaged in good faith to try to achieve a ceasefire. The question has always been with Hamas. That is where the question has been. That is where it remains. And the response we just saw from Special Envoy Witkoff is reflective of that.
Does progress these talks?
Well, what I can say is we continue to encourage direct talks between Russia and Ukraine in pursuit of a comprehensive ceasefire and eventually a negotiated peace settlement.
And as we close out our focus on Gaza and the Middle East, George Abdullah, a 74-year-old Lebanese teacher who became a left-wing symbol for the Palestinian cause, has been freed by France today after 41 years in jail. Described by his lawyer as the man who has spent the longest time in prison for events linked to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Abdullah left jail in the south of France in the early hours of Friday and was due to be put on a flight directly to Beirut. Convicted in 1987 for complicity in the murders in France of 2 diplomats, one American, one Israeli, Abdullah has gradually been forgotten by the wider public, but his release remains a cause célèbre for activists on the Marxist-Leninist left, which he still identifies. Welcome back. Thailand's leader has warned the clashes between Thailand and Cambodia, which have killed at least 16 people and displaced tens of thousands in both countries, could move towards war. Acting Prime Minister Putem Wikechai added that the fighting now included heavy weapons and had spread to 12 locations along the border. Thailand also accused Cambodia of firing into civilian areas and evacuated all villages deemed to be within the radius of its rockets. Cambodia, for its part, accused Thailand of using cluster munitions. Cluster munitions are banned in much of the world because of their indiscriminate effect on civilian populations. Thailand has not responded to the allegation. Thousands protested in Kyiv Thursday as the nationwide unrest entered its third day following President Volodymyr Zelensky's signature on a law cracking down on two national anti-corruption watchdogs. The president said it submitted another bill to the Verkhovna Rada, which he claimed would address the concerns, although protests have continued. Large-scale rallies were first sparked across Ukraine after the Verkhovna Rada passed the first bill placing the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office under the Prosecutor General appointed by the President. Both agencies said this would destroy their independence, as well as the Prosecutor's Office. President Zelensky tried to claim the move was to tackle alleged Russian influence. Arrests were made at Nablus on Monday, which critics argue was a ruse for the crackdown. Meanwhile, the EU has criticized the law as a serious step back from promises to protect democracy as part of Ukraine's bid to join the bloc. Delegates have begun arriving at the Iranian consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, for talks between Tehran and the E3 countries, it's UK, France and Germany. A meeting, which is being held at Deputy Foreign Minister level, is set to cover Iran's nuclear program. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghei said on Monday his country is not currently planning to hold talks with the United States, but indicated that Tehran will hold a negotiating meeting with the European parties at their request. These comments were made a few days after President Donald Trump claimed that Iran desperately wants to negotiate, a claim which Baghei denied. These developments follow the E3 countries' threat to activate their trigger mechanism or snapback sanctions, which would automatically reimpose UN restrictions on Tehran, which were lifted by the 2015 deal, the agreement which the first Trump administration withdrew from. Meanwhile, on Thursday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed his country would uphold its right to enrich uranium during the Istanbul talks. Iran has always insisted its nuclear program is peaceful. At this week's EU-China summit, the European Union warned it will no longer be able to keep its markets open to Chinese goods unless Beijing takes action to address the trade imbalance. Joining us from Berlin with more is the DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu. Chiponda, thanks for joining us on the program. What concessions were EU leaders able to secure from Beijing?
Well, EU leaders won't be coming back empty-handed, but the trip couldn't be considered a big success either. There were only minor gains. Brussels and Beijing pledged to step up action on climate change, but that was largely symbolic because they wanted to show their commitment to the Paris Agreement, which the United States withdrew from earlier this year. Now, the EU and China will also expand product geographical indicators. Now, that is what protects specific goods like Serrano ham or, say, feta cheese from fake ones. And there was also some movement regarding access to rare earth metals from China, but that was quite vague, and it is still unclear whether Beijing will lift its export controls for European companies. Now, in terms of one of the biggest topics, which is rebalancing trade with China, there was very little progress made.
So, Chiponda, where does this leave the ongoing trade dispute between the EU and China?
Well, this summit was initially supposed to take place in Brussels, but it was moved to Beijing because Chinese President Xi Jinping declined the invitation. And then it was cut down to 1 day instead of 2. So that does say a lot about how China sees the European Union. Now, Brussels, of course, wants European businesses to have the same level of market access in China as Chinese businesses have here in Europe. And that issue was raised on Thursday, but Beijing only said it would look into it. Beijing sees its 300 billion euro trade surplus with the European Union as an issue that is linked to China's production overcapacity and innovation rather than a market access issue for European companies. And now here in Europe, there are also fears that with Chinese businesses facing higher tariffs in the United States, Europe is more likely to become a dumping ground for cheap Chinese goods.
Understood. And how are the Trump administration's tariffs now affecting EU-China trade relations?
Well, that really depends on where you look in Europe. While there are some EU countries that are pushing for decoupling from China, like Germany, Spain, for instance, has been pushing for closer trade ties amid the trade conflict with the United States. But the differences, of course, between the EU and China aren't just about trade. It's also about geopolitics. China continues to trade with Russia amid the war in Ukraine. In fact, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said China's future approach to Russia's war in Ukraine will influence bilateral ties. So the Trump administration's tariffs haven't really brought Beijing and Brussels closer, but they have also kind of contributed to making an already difficult relationship even more complicated.
Yeah, lots of complication there. Chaponda, thanks again for joining us on the program. Today is World Drowning Prevention Day, a day to raise awareness about the silent but deadly epidemic of drowning and to encourage life-saving action worldwide. This year's theme is Your Story Can Save a Life, drowning prevention through shared experiences. Each year, over 300,000 people die from drowning globally. That's more than 30 deaths per hour. It's among the top 3 causes of death for children aged 1 to 14 years, with the highest toll in low and middle income countries. The 2025 campaign highlights the power of personal stories in inspiring change. Everyone is encouraged to share real experiences related to drowning, rescue, or prevention using the hashtag drowning prevention. Advocates for drowning prevention say some of the actions that can be taken to prevent this happening is you need to teach children and adults how to swim. You need to always supervise children near water, use barriers, set fences or covers around pools and water bodies. You need to promote CPR and rescue training, wear life jackets during water activities, and avoid alcohol near water. Also, you need to watch weather alerts before fishing or boating. They're encouraging people to share their story or water safety tips on social media, of course using the hashtag drowning prevention. They're also supposed to encourage others to learn basic swimming and CPR and support community efforts to keep children safe near water. Joining us now is Professor of Medicine at the University of Lagos, Professor Alera Roberts. She joins us from her office in Lagos. Professor, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much for having me.
You know, this just reminds us of one of the skills we should have learned when we were younger, which is learning how to swim. But that's no excuse, is it, for people knowing how to be near water? But drowning is one of the risks facing children, especially at the young age. We already identified ages 1 to 14, and that's because drowning happens unexpectedly. Most times children do not know how to call for help. When this is happening, even locally, not even near large bodies of water, but also in the home. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, I can. And today is a very pertinent day to be talking about it. Coincidentally, I'm one of the Unilag female swimming champions. I swam for the university in 1980 and in 1985. So this is something that is very, very personal to me because I've seen and heard so many sad stories that the theme for this year's Drowning Prevention Day is so apt. It is so important that we share these stories and experiences so that others can learn from them. And funnily enough, like you quite rightly mentioned, a large number of drownings in children under the age of 14 do take place in the home. They don't even have to be the privileged, bougie child going to the swimming pool or going to the beach or whatnot. I mean, those ones are terribly sad as well. But I think people need to be aware that the fact that you're not going to a swimming pool or to the seaside does not mean that you're not in danger of drowning. And I think, you know, families need to be extremely, extremely aware of that. I recall there was a time when water supply, in the beginning, when water supply, you know, to homes sort of took a turn for the worse. And, you know, Lagos State Water Corporation wasn't supplying as much as it ought to be. You know, the population had expanded beyond its capacity. And so people started storing water in buckets and bowls and things like that. And, you know, people forget, if I move away, you can see my background a little bit. People forget how easily a child can topple into a bucket of water and quite rightly cannot call for help because water has filled its mouth, its nose, and everything. And, you know, this can happen in minutes. It can happen literally in a few minutes. And before you know what is happening, oxygen has been cut off to the brain for longer than 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and disaster. So another issue that we are having, we've read the stories, and I think it's become a bit more commonplace now that people have dug shallow wells. Child is playing ball falls into the well, and the child literally leans over thinking he's going to get his ball or his toy from wherever it fell into, but it's a shallow well with water at the bottom. And before you know what is happening, your mother is calling, Tunde, Mosu, come and eat, food is ready. And the child cannot be found. And these are some of the things that, you know, telling the stories, we need to keep telling the stories so that people are aware and take the necessary precautions.
Indeed. I mean, these are really horrific stories that you're telling, but they're also commonplace. If we do take a poll, a lot more children are at risk of drowning. But for adults, how often does this happen for people who are already grown, adults in domesticated environments? How often do you find drowning incidents?
Well, sadly, as WHO says, the numbers are going down, but they're not going down fast enough. And the numbers in the low and middle income countries have only gone down 3% in the last decade, which means it's happening a lot more often. Of course, so many more people are going to the seaside. And, you know, there's something that we need to know. I learned this in geography all those many years ago, and it stuck with me because it's so true. If you have noticed, the continental shelf of the west coast of Africa is very, very short. And those of you who will recall growing up in the 60s and 70s when we used to go to Bar Beach in those days, you had to walk for a long time before we got from the Ahmadu Bello Road, which has been there since before independence, till we got to the seaside. In my lifetime, the continental shelf eroded the shore till we had to build the Lagos Wall. Now, what does all this mean? What it all means is that there is a very strong riptide that literally can take even the most seasoned swimmer, Olympic gold medalist, and it can pull you, and it literally tugs you and pulls you down into the water, almost 30, 40, 50 feet.
Wow.
And before you can struggle your way back to the top, if you don't know what is happening, if you haven't learned to hold your breath for at least a minute and a half, you drown. I lost a classmate that way. I lost a classmate that way. Medical school. I lost a classmate that way. So a lot of people don't know that and it's what spurred the Mami Water legend. That be careful, Mami Water is in the water. No, it's not. It's a riptide. It is still there. That's why sometimes people drown like that, and the bodies come up further along the west coast of Africa, sometimes as far away as Togo, Ghana, before we pick the dead body. So, you know, people need to be aware that, look, when it comes to the seaside, all our beaches. Please be looking at it from a distance. If it is deeper than the ankle of your feet, don't go in. I don't care if you're an Olympic gold medalist swimmer. Don't go in. The fishermen will also warn you. Because the second thing is that people must learn to swim. Swimming is not a bougie, it's not an elitist thing. It's a survival skill. It's a survival skill.
Professor, we're going to take a short break now. This conversation, of course, we need to continue after the break. We'll be back here on The World Today on Channels Television. Welcome back to The World Today, World Drowning Prevention Day. We have had Professor of Medicine at the University of Lagos, Professor Alero Roberts, speaking to us about the dangers of drowning and how dangerous this can be, not just for children, but also for adults. Professor, thanks for staying with us on the program. So there should be a warning, shouldn't there, for everyone regarding, how dangerous it is and how easily people could drown, how easily people could drown. What sort of advice do you give to people apart from staying away from large bodies of water, especially for those who are in the home? We've also seen, grown adults fall into wells and open, bodies of water. People just, and for this season, which is a summer, lots of people will be headed towards, water parks and beaches and so on. What's the advice you have for them?
Well, number one, people have to get their water skills up. And by water skills, I mean, what do you do when you're in a body of water? First of all, you cannot panic. You must not panic, because if you panic, you're going to just burn up oxygen faster than your body can regenerate. Secondly, you must learn to swim. Learning to swim is an essential survival skill. You must learn to swim so that at least you can learn to keep your body up, your head out of water. Because one of the things that we're not even remembering is that this is the rainy season, this is Lagos. We've seen what happened with flooding.
Right.
And with flooding, the danger is that it covers up the drains, the sides of the road and whatnot. And, God forbid you fall into a hole and you're swept away by an overfull drain. How do you keep yourself alive until you can get yourself out of that situation? So you don't even have to be near a very large body of water to drown. You've got to get water skills. You've got to know, be able to keep yourself alive during that period. You have to know CPR, because you may be the person, somebody else is drowning and has been pulled out or has had a near drowning incident, and resuscitation needs to start. It's not when you rush the person to A&E in Louth and then, in that time period, the damage could occur, has occurred to the brain, to the lungs. If you can carry out CPR, then you are of use to the next person next to you. This is health, this is education, this is awareness. And you are right, coming into the summer period, families, parents have to be on alert. You cannot leave your children at home with incompetent, God forgive me, incompetent house help and go out the whole day and come home and expect that you'll not hear a sad story. Home accidents, like I said, those are the saddest ones of all that I've had to deal with. Those are absolutely the saddest ones of all. So people just have to be aware and please, if you've heard a story, you know somebody else who has a story, share those stories so that we all learn. I didn't even pay much attention to the home accident versions until I heard 2 or 3 stories, and I'm thinking, oh my word, I also store water in buckets and whatnot. So now I've learned to be more careful. Let me give you another sad one. Drowning in one's own body fluids, drinking, use of alcohol. And, a person has used alcohol, particularly the young adults who probably don't have much body reserve. They don't know their limits. They drink enough alcohol, they get drunk, they lose consciousness, and then they vomit. Right. And their head down, nose, and that vomitus is there, and they can drown in their own vomit. That's also drowning. And so this is awareness, it's education, it's sharing stories. Everybody has to share their stories so that we are all aware of what goes on. If you're out with your friends and your friend gets drunk, please, as he or she is drunk, because now girls and boys do the same thing. As he or she is drunk, make sure they are seated or upright. Right. So that at least even if they throw up and they vomit, it falls out all over them, but it doesn't, their nose and mouth is not lying in a pool of vomit that can drown them.
Or probably just avoid drinking altogether. Doctor, I wanted you to speak to
That's the ideal.
Yeah, I wanted you to speak to the threshold of time that you have between when a person is drowning, in the process of drowning, and what the period of time that you need to save the person when the incident occurs, and then when the person should be saved. How much time do we have to save such a person?
I'm reluctant to do that because it depends on the person, age, size, lung capacity, and so on and so forth. So, there are some people, but I would say definitely 4 minutes would be about the threshold because the brain cannot do without oxygen for more than 4 minutes. But then there are some people, if it's very cold water and it's a very young child, you might find that's 5 or 6 minutes and the child can be resuscitated and be all right. Some children, 30 seconds, 1 minute, and the damage is done and it's too late. So I'm reluctant to give a time frame, publicly like that, because again, it would really depend on the clinical state of the person who is drowned or drowning or has had a near drowning incident.
Okay, and just before we let you go, Doctor, water transportation has become really popular here in Nigeria, in Lagos, and in some, states that are close to large bodies of water. What do you do when you have no life jackets and you can't get one?
Don't go. Don't go. You are too important to your family to risk drowning. Even I, championship swimmer, I can swim from here to wherever. I will not even try it because there are bodies of water that are just not conducive to swimming. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there must be a life jacket provided. If water transportation is likely to become your preferred mode of transport, buy your own life jacket. Right. I'm also a cyclist. I never cycle without a helmet. I don't expect that the bicycle is going to provide a helmet for me. I buy my own. If I have to take Okada or whatnot, I have my own helmet because my head is important to me. If you have to take water transportation and it's on a mode of transport that the life jacket is not likely to be provided, buy your own.
Thank you so much, Professor Alero Roberts, for speaking with us. Once again, we'd like to remind people the hashtag is drowning prevention. You can tweet at us, at Channels Television, or perhaps you want to also provide your X handle as well for viewers at home so that they can reach out to you. You've been an Olympic swimmer yourself and you having all of the answers.
My children laugh at me. I don't have an X handle.
Okay, so just send it to channelstv.com.
When I grow up, I promise you, I'll get an X handle when I grow up.
Okay, so Channels Television on X, you can send your tweets at us. Tell us your story if you have ever been in a situation where you almost drowned or you know someone who has. Thanks again, Professor Roberts, for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're back to world news now as a major shift is set to be underway in the Sahel region of as Russia officially replaces the Wagner Group with a new state-controlled force known as the Africa Corps. According to a new report by the Timbuktu Institute, this marks a turning point in Moscow's military and diplomatic strategy across the region. The deployment, announced just a day after Wagner's withdrawal from Mali, signals a move from covert operations to an overt state-backed presence. The report is titled Russian Positioning in the Sahel from Wagner to Africa Corps. And unlike Wagner, Africa Corps is fully controlled by the Russian state and tied to military intelligence. The report calls this the end of plausible deniability. Analysts say this could redefine regional power dynamics and influence, especially for the future of the Sahel that's already grappling with terrorism, insurgency, and military governance. And a new chapter it is for Africa's tourism and aviation sectors. The second UN Tourism and International Civil Aviation Organizational Ministerial Conference on Tourism and Air Transport in Africa ends in Angola with a bold call for greater integration, stronger partnerships, and united action among African nations. Kingsley Uranta is covering this on behalf of Channels Television.
Promote visa facilitation. For 3 solid days, they dug into their business, creative, and professional experience to hammer out solutions to the missing link between tourism and air transportation in Africa.
In aviation, it's like chicken and egg. No, if you don't have planes, you don't have tourists. If you don't have tourists, you don't have planes. Demand is here. All participants mentioned that the population of Africa is growing. Economically, Africa is one of the growing continents in the world. When people are getting better, what they want first is to travel, and demand is there.
Do you think this strong contingent is taken back to Nigeria from here?
What I have seen here is strong collaboration. We can sit and talk without the synergy and the enablement, that power to wanting to get all the policies that have been put in place to actually be implemented. So that, and then the use of technology, because while we want our airspace open and all that, we need to ensure that security, higher security is in place, because that is one of the things I have really picked up here.
The panel discussion teased out critical views and areas that require urgent attention in advancing the sectors and building a sustainable synergy. The issues at stake required high-level participation, as exemplified by the presence of ministers of tourism and transportation in Africa and the Secretary General of the UN Tourism, Zurab Pololikashvili, whose term ends in December this year. Although Africa recorded 74 million international arrivals in 2024, a 12% increase over 2023 and 7% more than 2019, there was an increased urgency for integrated transport tourism strategies. Elsia Grandcourt, Regional Director of Africa in the UN Tourism, captured and presented the ministerial declaration this way.
The ministers have also emphasized the need to facilitate intra-African travel, strengthen the conditions for peace and understanding between peoples through simplified visa regimes, reduced fees, fast-track procedures, and longer validity multi-entry visas.
To the delegates, a few backslaps and good handshakes signified a fulfilling outcome of the conference.
We've achieved the objectives, but as has been said here, now we need to really apply ourselves and get to work.
There are a strong political will, even if we don't have, as a ministers of tourism, a lot of money to implement it, but we have a strong will and we have a strong connection and commitment within the ministries of tourism to definitely change the face of tourism in Africa.
In essence, the conference solidified our shared vision, leveraging tourism and air transport as twin engines of inclusive, sustainable growth in Africa. Angola as a host has positioned itself as key future player, energized by major national investments and partnerships with the UN Tourism and International Civil Aviation Organization. Kingsley Uranta, Channels Television News.
And as we had already established, a hot summer it is in most parts of Asia and across Europe. Unrelenting heat waves continuing to grip South Korea. Residents in the capital city Seoul finding refreshing relief by being temporarily transported to a summer beach resort. Gwanghwamun Square, a large public space located in the heart of Seoul, has been transformed into a seaside resort. Heralded as the 2025 Seoul Summer Beach Festival, the square is now home to expansive temporary pools, exhilarating water slides and sandy zones, offering a beach-like escape right in the city's core. as temperatures soar above 35 degrees Celsius on most days. Locals and tourists alike are delighted that the festival provides a much-needed break from the sweltering heat without the necessity of leaving Seoul, as they can enjoy a quick dip in 2 temporary swimming pools.
I think this is a great idea to have a temporary pool where children can cool down in the heat and have a great time, because it's really useful. We are enjoying Korea, and it's a beautiful country. Even though it's very hot, we still love it.
In France, it's not humid. It's just hot, and it's just hot. But here it's humid. It's I don't have the word, but it's good, and I see swimming pools for kids, and it's cool.
Well, stay cool as much as you can this weekend. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Uvani.